I think it's important to know that this is urban maple syrup tapping. I'm not going into the country, I'm not going into a forest, I'm literally doing it in my own yard. I used to do a couple of neighbors' yards, like I said. So this is something you can do living in town, living in a city, living, if there's trees, maple trees in your yard or a neighbor's yard or in the parking area, the city right away, that's something you can do. Just always ask permission and clean up your mess when you're done, and I haven't had anybody have a problem with it. I've always given a little syrup to the people that have let me tap their trees. Kind of relative to how much I get from their trees is how much I give them. But they've all appreciated it. Don't know how they used it. My neighbors, there's quite a few elderly people or older retired people in my neighborhood, so I think they truly appreciate it and enjoy it. When you tap the trees, you can tap it anywhere around the tree you want, and if it's a big enough tree, you can tap it multiple times. Like I read somewhere, you could tap a tree as small as 6 inches in diameter. I did some 6-8 inch trees a couple years ago in my neighbor's yard, and they really didn't produce a whole lot. I didn't really think it was worth tapping them, but they say you can do it that far down. The scar will heal up fine, won't hurt the tree at all. But I found that when I tap a tree, if I do it on the south side of the tree, where the sun hits and warms the tree up the most, is where I get the most sap production. So I try to tap the tree where the sun's going to get it. If I tap it on the north side of the tree, less sun, I tend to get a little less sap. Could be coincidence, but it seems to me that seems to be a pattern I've noticed. Anyways, one more tip. The temperatures are getting above freezing during the day and below freezing at night. It's time to start tapping some maple trees to get some sap to make syrup. In the past, I've tapped just in my own yard and in a few neighbors' yards, and end up with 40 gallons of unrefined sap. So that boils down to a gallon or so of maple syrup by the time it's done. This year I'm only going to do a couple trees in our yard, in part because one of those neighbors has since moved and I haven't asked the new neighbors to tap trees, and the other neighbor I cut down the big silver maple that we were tapping and getting a lot of sap from. So no longer do we have the same trees we used to use. And I just don't need a ton of syrup. This is more to show you if you want to do it. It's pretty simple. You don't need to go buy a lot of expensive stuff. It's actually one of the cheaper things you could get into if you wanted to do it. So let's start with the spiles. I make my own just out of a branch. This is what I had in my garage, so I grabbed it, but this is a lot bigger diameter than you would need. Finish, this is about 3/4 of an inch in diameter here, and that's not a magic number. You don't have to have it that size, but 3/4 of an inch makes for a reasonably sized hole when you're putting this in here. Now if you had it bigger, then that hole would be bigger, and when your sap filled up, you would only get as far down as you put that hole, as much sap as you're going to get. Otherwise it's going to spill out. So that's a pretty simple size. So 7/32, I believe, is the size of drill bit used to go through. Yep, 7/32 to drill through the spile like that. I put it in my drill. You could put it in a vise, hold it by your hand, use vice grips, whatever you want to do to cut it. They're 3 inches long, and about a 1/2 inch up, it's a 1/2 inch diameter. So about that much ends up going into the tree. You can see this darkened part here. I don't know if you can or not, but in here it's a little darkened. That is where the bark will kind of wrap around. That goes into the tree, right? So I need to use a bit big enough to get this into the tree. So roughly a 1/2 inch bit to get started. You could use a piece of scrap wood. This is just a piece of scrap ash wood. You could grind that down to end up looking like this. You know, whatever you want to use, whatever you have around, whatever's available. I use 2-liter bottles because they're easy. There's a lid on it I can take off for pouring. I can pour through there. Drill a 7/32 hole in each side, and I only do 7/32 because that's the bit I have in there for doing the spiles. And run a piece of wire through it. And you could use string, you could use copper wire. This is just like a baling wire. It's a coated baling wire that I had around. It seems to work the best for me because it, you know, when you bend it, it holds its form. So when you twist it up, it stays twisted. And then you'd put the spile in the tree, tap it in with a rubber mallet, and you want to put it in the tree at a slight downward angle, right? So as the tree's drawing water up, the sap comes out the spile and drips into your like this. If it's like this, the sap isn't going to want to drip. So at the very least you'd want it level, but I put them at a slight angle. And then I put a screw a little further up in the tree just to support this, because on a windy day, if you just have it sitting on this little groove that's cut in the spile, you might lose your receptacle. I run this on here to get it to that size. I get the bark all off it, get the rough shape, do this, and then you're good to go. And generally I would drill the hole first. Again, it's supposed to be about 3 inches is what I would cut it at. Okay, so you can see how it's taking shape. I'm not going to hog this whole thing down to the size I need it to be. I don't need to waste the paper or the time really, but you see the idea. This would be a lot faster if you used a piece of wood about 1 inch in diameter, because remember in the end you want it to be about 3/4 of an inch. So, but that's how you do it, and you can use a inch diameter branch from a tree or a chunk. Okay, I apologize for the wind, but so this is about just under a 1/2 inch drill bit. You're gonna go maybe 3/4 of an inch into the tree. Tap it in like that. And I'm gonna put a screw in up here just to help support it. And I remove these every year. I don't leave the screws in the trees. And you can see it's already dripping. I really should have done this yesterday. Let me bring it over here and show you. All right. So we put the spile in at an angle. You can see that. Got the screw for support up there. And now we'll go do one more tree. That spile out. I can already see it filling up with sap. And you can see this one dripping already too. Literally just put them in, so I really should have been out here yesterday, maybe even over the weekend and doing this.